Breaking news out of Carroll County, where a private hearing on the Delphi murders case is being held right now at the courthouse in Delphi. The man suspected of killing Abby Williams and Libby German, Richard Allen, is in person for that hearing. There was an earlier public hearing to discuss the prosecution's request for a gag order and the defense's request for change of venue. And it sounds like a decision was made on at least one of them. Our Rich Nye was in that hearing and joins us from outside the Carroll County Courthouse in Delphi right now. Rich, tell us what you heard.
Well, Karen, the biggest decision made today is that Richard Allen's trial for the murders of Libby German and Abby Williams almost 6 years ago now here in Delphi, that trial will stay here in Carroll County. However, there will be a jury brought in from another county to hear that case. The gag order in this case remains in place. The parties involved, whether they are attorneys, family, police, law enforcement agency officers, they are still under that gag order. And finally, we have a bail hearing. The next court date is February 17th. Richard Allen will be back here in Delphi again for that. And at that time, they'll also talk about a new trial date. Karen, this was set for a trial in March. All parties agreed that they will not be ready for a trial in March.
And Rich, let's start with that change of venue request. Now, it sounds like the judge granted part of that.
That is correct in the fact that the jury will come from somewhere else. The judge asked both attorneys on the defense and prosecution about this, and everyone agreed that they could not find a jury. It would be impossible, if not, it would be difficult, if not impossible, to find a jury in Carroll County that would be impartial, knowing so much about this case and its history. And so there will be a change of venue from the standpoint the jury will come from another county. They'll take about a week for the attorneys to get together, talk it over, and suggest a county where that jury might come from. They're supposed to get back to the judge in about a week in that regard, but the trial will stay here in Delphi at this Carroll County courthouse.
All right, and Rich, now the prosecution, they also had a request asking for a gag order in this case. Now, did the judge make a decision there?
Samantha, you've been here for both of these hearings so far in the Richard Allen case. Talk about what we know now about this gag order.
Yeah, that's right. So Judge Gull talked about this for just a couple minutes. She was very brief talking about the gag order. Essentially, as you mentioned, she is continuing that. She did take a couple minutes to remind the legal teams that technically they are allowed to speak to the media, but only about procedural details or logistics, things like when we will see them back in court again. Technically, they are allowed to talk about that, but know the details of the case. She also took a couple minutes to address the family that was in the courtroom today. We did have quite a few family members, and she said, as a reminder, you are under this gag order as well. Of course, as they left the courthouse this morning, no comment from family.
All right, that's Samantha Johnson. And Samantha or Rich, now we know the private hearing was scheduled right after the public one. What was being discussed there?
Well, that went on for about an hour, actually, after we were all removed from the courtroom gallery. We know one of the issues being discussed was how much money can the defense spend on hiring expert witnesses. Lots of other little tedious matters that are well before a trial to be attended to that were handled during that hour-long session.
Yeah, and I think it's important, like you mentioned, that private meeting was an hour. Our hearing, when we were in that earlier this morning, was less than 10 minutes. We started late. It started around 10:30, but it was brief. It was to the point. But that private meeting, like you mentioned, was a lot longer.
Samantha, you've been here for both of these hearings now for Richard Allen. What did you notice from the first one and then today?
Something that really stood out to me, Rich, and I noticed it the second that Richard Allen walked into that room. The first time we saw him a couple months ago, he almost seemed stunned. It was that deer in headlights look as he kind of took in that courtroom for the first time. But when we saw him today, he had a much more serious, almost driven, focused look on his face. He had almost a frown. He seemed very dedicated. And something else we noticed today, it did appear that Richard Allen had family members here.
That's correct. Richard Allen, what we believe may have been his wife, was here in the courtroom today. Richard Allen just left this courthouse about 10 minutes ago, and we have some brand new video, the closest video we've seen of Richard Allen since his arrest, and we'll show that to you tonight on Eyewitness News. On 13 News.
The Samantha Johnson, thank you both so much for bringing us that great information at the court there in Delphi. Now, we have been following the story for years, and you can find the timeline of events leading up to today, the charging document showing how police identified Allen as a suspect, and what we've heard from Abby and Libby's families at WTHR.com/Delphi.